All right, so today we are starting season 2, episode 2 of In the Dark, The Route. So in this case against Curtis Flowers, it relies heavily on 3 threads of evidence. The route that he allegedly walked the morning of the murders, the gun that the investigators believed he used, and the people he supposedly confessed to in jail. In this episode, you're going to meet the witnesses who said that they saw Flowers walking through downtown Winona, Mississippi, on the morning of the murders. Some of their stories now waver on key details, so pay close attention. Right now, what you should have in front of you is your organizer that you got in class. If you do not have it with you, then it is linked on Schoology. You can print it out and you can write on that. But I will be stopping when it is time to write something down. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And in the first part of the organizer, you have one box titled Racism in Winona's Past Prior to 1996. So I want you to tell me some of the things that were happening in Winona prior to 1996. You do get at least 2 things in that space. And then in the second box, Racism in Winona's Present, 1996 to the present day. So what are some things that have happened since 1996 that show that Winona, this town of Winona, does have some racism problems? I'd also like to point out to you that there will be a racial slur. Curtis's mother, Curtis is the guy who's on trial, his mother repeats a racial slur that was said to her. This will happen at 6 minutes and 30 seconds in the podcast. I'm not going to censor it out. It's the reality of what this woman was living. But I am going to let you know that I do not approve of it, nor do I expect anybody to use it or repeat it in classroom. So it's not okay. But it was said to her, and she is simply restating what was said to her. So we will begin.
Go back and listen to it first, and this will make a lot more sense. One other note, this episode contains a word that's offensive. Last time on In the Dark. Every time. Do you remember how you heard that Curtis had been arrested for the murders?
On the radio. I thought it was crazy.
Curtis Giovanni Flowers murdered those 4 people. There's no doubt in my mind.
Curtis Flowers was sentenced to death on 4 counts of capital murder. That conviction actually marked the 6th time Flowers had been tried in the case.
It's too long. Way too long. And Curtis Flowers is still in prison, and it's still dragging it on.
I know Curtis didn't do it. I would go to my grave believing Curtis didn't do it.
If you try a man and you go 6 times for the same crime, well, something is wrong about the entire system.
On the west side of Winona, in the middle of a neighborhood with lots of houses close together, there's what looks like an abandoned parking lot. It's nearly a block long, it's overgrown, the grass isn't mowed. It's the kind of place you might drive by and never give a second thought. But if you slowed down and looked more closely, you'd notice a row of bricks poking out of the grass along the edge of the lot, and a set of concrete steps that lead nowhere. If you got out of your car and walked onto the lot and headed all the way to the back, you'd find an old desk overturned in the grass. You'd see that someone had taken a silver marker and written the words, "Merry Christmas." This abandoned lot used to be a school. Back in the 1960s, it was an all-black school, and it was in a black neighborhood. But in 1970, the federal government ordered the city of Winona to integrate its schools, and white and black students started to go to school here together. But then, 4 years later, on the night before Valentine's Day, after all the students and teachers had left, a fire broke out. The flames lit up the sky, and people could smell the smoke for miles. Within hours, the entire block-long brick building had burned to the ground. Nearly everyone I talked to about the fire, black and white, told me they think it was arson and that it was related to integration. Right next to the field, where the school used to be, there's a small white house with a porch on the side. This is the house where Curtis Flowers' parents live.
Hello.
Lola and Archie Flowers have been married for 54 years. Everything in their house is just so. The dining room table is set perfectly with cloth napkins. In the living room, there's a curved tan velvet couch with fringe on the bottom and a matching ottoman. Lola and Archie are both retired, and although they have 5 other children and many grandchildren, they have devoted most of their time in the past 21 years to their son, Curtis. Curtis's parents talk on the phone with him almost every day. They regularly make the 80-minute drive each way to Parchman Prison.
Every 2 weeks we go.
Okay.
We see him the first and third Tuesday each month. We don't miss a visit.
Can you bring him anything?
Girl, when you get through getting suched and everything, every time you go, you might as well just leave your clothes off and go on over there.
They really search it.
Yeah, scan you and everything.
From the beginning, Lola and Archie Flowers have believed their son is innocent, and they spent a lot of money on Curtis's case. How much do you think you spent?
Shit, it was like I counted that up. It was like $100,000.
Oh my gosh.
I'm telling you.
How did you afford it?
I used to work 3 jobs a day.
Oh my gosh.
He was working double twice. And then after that, we went and borrowed some from the bank and everything to pay for the next lawyers and stuff. We had some money then, but we don't have it now.
Over the past 21 years and 6 trials, Curtis Flowers has had every archetype of lawyer: the father-son legal team, the high-profile black nationalist attorney, the dedicated public defenders. When I met his parents, Lola and Archie, last summer, Curtis's case had been taken on for free by a new team of lawyers from the Innocence Project and a high-powered East Coast law firm. Lola was feeling optimistic for the first time in a while. She was thinking ahead to the next family reunion.
So we're having the next one Labor Day weekend, so I hope Curtis out by then. Maybe the Supreme Court will say something. That's what we're waiting on now, see what they got to say.
Do you let yourself think about that moment? Like, do you think about what that would be like if he...
Oh, yeah, I think about that all the time, you know. Ooh, what a good time we're going to have. And a lot of the families say, when they let him out, we all will be there. So, yeah, we're going to have a good time.
Curtis's father, Archie, didn't say much the first time I met him. He sat next to his wife, and when she talked, he would just sigh or shake his head. I asked the Flowers if they had any photos of Curtis. They told me they only had one, because in 1999, just before Curtis's second trial, their house burned down. Lola and Archie were out of town in Memphis when it happened. Their daughter was sleeping over at their house with some of their grandkids.
My daughter was home, and she said it sounded like something blowed up or something. There was a loud noise. And when she went to look, everything was burning. It just burned everywhere.
As for the cause of the fire, according to the report from the fire department, which I got a copy of, there was no final determination as to what caused it. But Lola told me that after the fire, someone told her that they'd heard something from a white person in town.
But somebody said they heard, say if they let that nigga go, another house gonna burn.
What do you think of that?
What do you think I think of it? That somebody probably set it afire.
Many years ago, around the time of the first trial, Curtis's friends and family tried to organize people in town to help Curtis. I went with our producer, Samara, to talk to some of the people who were involved in it. Pastor Jimmy Forrest and his wife, Rosie.
Hi, are you Reverend Forrest?
Pastor Forrest had had a stroke the previous year, so Rosie did most of the talking.
But what we was trying to do was, family-wise, is try to see if we need to raise money, get lawyers, find him a lawyer, or do we need to, we were just going to talk about and find out what it is that we can do to help Curtis. Yeah, just be there for him.
Rosie said her husband Jimmy took the lead back then on organizing a community meeting. Rosie told me that it felt like there was some momentum there, like they could really get something going. But then one day, before the meeting had happened, a woman came into the salon where Rosie worked, a black woman whom Rosie refused to name. And this woman told Rosie that she'd been asked to deliver a message to her husband Jimmy from the white side of town. The message was brief.
He needs to relax. He needs to relax, cool off.
Who was the message from?
We don't know exactly, but we didn't want our house burned or anything to happen to our family.
And so did you still have the meeting?
Do we do it? No.
We didn't. Everybody just disappeared. We had planned to get together and talk about it. Nobody. So we just didn't do anything else. We backed off.
And because it sounded like it's a threat, right, that you received?
It was. It was a threat. If you had been here, matter of fact, if I knew enough about the law system or lawyers or whatever, I would have investigated that incident. I would have tried to follow that up, but I didn't know enough. We don't have the bad part about it. Can't prove none of this stuff.
Had you heard of things like that happening in Winona before?
I have. So that's what put the fear.
This is Season 2 of In the Dark, an investigative podcast from APM Reports. I'm Madeline Barron. This season is about the case of Curtis Flowers, a black man from a small town in Mississippi who spent the past 21 years fighting for his life, and a white prosecutor who spent that same time trying just as hard to execute him.
I'm going to pause it right here for a minute. What I want you to do is to make sure that you have filled in those two boxes at the top. You should have at least 2 things in the racism prior to 1996 and at least 3 things in the racism since 1996. Now, this next part from 947 to 1258, it's going to describe the route that they took. Look at this. You have access to this. I put the link on our web's Schoology, but it gives you the route that he must have taken. So you can kind of follow this along. You can click on each of the witnesses and you can see where each of them was actually standing. You can see the location of the different stores and things on this site. When you click on it, it gives you even more detail about what happened with that person. So that's something you can go back and check. But here's what you're going to do. So for this next part, we're going to listen to 947 to 1258. You're going to look at this map. You can look at it. I'm going to make sure we have locations clicked, which is what we have right here so that you can see it. And you can kind of follow along to where Curtis allegedly went. You're going to pretend that you're on the jury hearing this testimony about the route. Is this strong evidence against Flowers? Why or why not? So next to each thing that's listed here, you're going to consider the route, the directions. Was it impulsive, unplanned, planned? Did he plan it in advance? What do you think? It all happened early in the morning when everyone was out. So who would walk that far with so many witnesses? I want you to think about that. And on these strange looking lines, I want you to tell me, is this strong evidence? And I want you to give me very specifics as to why or why not. You'll be writing it in this box with these lines that are kind of messed up. So you don't actually have to write on the lines if you don't want to. So hit pause. Make sure you filled in that top part. When you're done, come back, hit play again, and we're going to listen to 1258.
I was in Mississippi to find out what was going on in the case of Curtis Flowers, to find out why the prosecutor, Doug Evans, had tried the case 6 times. I decided to start out my reporting by looking at the evidence that Doug Evans presented to the jurors in those 6 trials. The way I saw it, the case against Curtis Flowers really came down to 3 main things. The route he said Curtis walked the morning of the murders, the gun he said Curtis used to murder the 4 people at the store, and the confessions he said that Curtis made to his cellmates. The route, the gun, the confessions. I decided to start with the route. I went with our producer, Natalie, to check it out for ourselves. Okay, so we are standing in front of Curtis Flowers' house where he was living in 1996, and what we're about to do is walk the route that the state says Curtis walked that day.
And it's like 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, so it's about the time that he would have started out according to the state. Okay, so let's start walking to our right, basically. According to Doug Evans, Curtis had walked everywhere that morning. He got up early on the morning of July 16th, left his house on the west side of town, and started walking east. In the neighborhood where Curtis lived, the houses are small and close together. It's hilly, the yards are short, and some houses are practically up on the street. People are out in their yards, hanging out, waving to people as they drive by.
Good, honey.
According to Doug Evans, Curtis walked out of his neighborhood and he went east. He crossed over one of the town's biggest streets, Highway 51, and kept going. Curtis turned down a street that led to a small sewing factory.
We are coming up to Angelica Drive.
He walked up to the parking lot right outside the factory and stole a gun from the glove compartment of a car.
He's gonna walk home.
Then he walked all the way home, back to the west side of town, his neighborhood.
Crossing 51. Now we're back on Curtis's side of town.
Curtis was at his house for a few minutes, then he left again, this time to go to Tardy Furniture. Tardy Furniture was all the way on the other side of town, on the side of town where Curtis just was. So he headed back east to go to the store.
Crossing another busy street.
He walked past block after block of houses, and as he got closer to Tardy Furniture, he started to pass by businesses, an auto body shop, a dry cleaners. He arrived at Tardy Furniture, walked inside, and killed all 4 people there. Then he walked out the front door and headed west to go back home. On the way, he stopped at a convenience store on Highway 51 to buy chips and a 6-pack of beer.
This is such a long walk. It really is.
By the time Natalie and I were done, we'd walked for an hour and 36 minutes. The route the prosecutor, Doug Evans, said Curtis Flowers took was long. It was nearly 4 miles. And it's brazen. It would have taken Curtis all over the town of Winona that morning. When Curtis Flowers talked to investigators on the day of the murders, and later when he testified in court, Curtis said he never walked that route. In fact, he said he was never on the east side of town at all that morning. He'd spent the whole morning in his own neighborhood on the west side. But the problem for Curtis Flowers was that the prosecutor, Doug Evans, had found witnesses who placed Curtis at almost every point on that route. These route witnesses were one of the strongest parts of the state's case. Each of them raised their right hand and swore an oath and testified to seeing Curtis that day as he walked by. Although none of the witnesses testified that they saw Curtis carrying a gun or saw any blood on him, their testimony was powerful. Most of these route witnesses knew Curtis. A lot of them have known Curtis their entire lives. Most of them are black, and they'd grown up in the same neighborhood as Curtis. When Doug Evans put them on the stand and asked them to describe who they saw that morning, these witnesses could not have been more clear. They would point to Curtis and be like, "It was Curtis. There he is. I've known him for years." It was hard for Curtis's lawyers to break the spell of the route. They tried cross-examining each of the witnesses, but it didn't seem to do much. If anything, as the trials went on, the witnesses seemed to get even more certain and even more angry at the defense attorneys for doubting them. It was easy to see how a jury would be convinced by these route witnesses. To the jurors, these witnesses came across as credible, as people doing the right thing. Doug Evans told them that what the witnesses said, all their individual stories, it all fit together. It made sense as one story, one route, a clear, convincing story about a man walking to commit murder.
All right. So, you're going to do 2 things now. We listened a little past, and that's okay. We listened to where I wanted you to hear the end of. First, you just heard the testimony about the route that he took, right? Remember that? A little crazy. So he comes out of his house, he follows along this, here, goes all the way down this highway, all the way over here, steals some gun from here, comes all the way back up, over, back to his house, leaves his house, goes this way, all the way up to Tardy Furniture, kills everybody, comes back this way, stops at Kelly's Stop and Go, gets something, continues, and goes back home. A lot of walking early in the morning. So, and they said that it took well over an hour to do. So, what do you think about this? What do you think about this testimony about the route? Just the route itself. Does this make sense? Does it sound like a reasonable thing? Was it impulsive and unplanned, or did he plan this out in advance? What are your thoughts? So you're writing this in the box on the first page. Then you're going to flip to your second page, flip it on the back, and you're in the section that says 1259 to 1249. It says, in your own words, explain why the jury finds the witnesses' statements to be so powerful. Think about the people that were on the witness stand. What type of people were they? Were they his friends? Were they his enemies? Did they have anything against him? What about them made them seem so convincing? And I want you to fill in that box. So you can hit pause and do that. Then you're going to come back and we're going to take a memory quiz. So I want you to think about this. Ready? What was the first unit that we did this entire school year? What was the second unit that we did? Without looking back, what were the dates of winter break? What did you eat for dinner last Wednesday night? So that was just a quick little memory quiz. How easy do you think that was? Here are the answers to some of those questions. I'll put them in the note. So I'm including this to show you the limitations of your memory. These witnesses that you're about to hear in this next section did not come forward until months later. Yet all of them are really sure about the times and what Curtis was wearing. So that's interesting. Just think about your own memory and how you were able to recall those things. How different is your memory from these witnesses' memory? Is this really something, are they going to remember, oh yes, it was 9 a.m. and he was wearing a striped shirt? What are your thoughts on that about memory in general? And the fact that these witnesses that we're about to hear when you come to class next time didn't come forward for like 4 months. Think about that. Make sure you hit submit when you finish this.